I'm 55 now. And I think I can finally say it out loud. Not because it stopped hurting, it didn't. But maybe because I'm tired of pretending it was something it wasn't. We met in 1995. Back then, the world smelled like rust, sweat, gasoline, and hope. I was in my early 20s, wearing hand-sewn dresses made from my mom's old skirts. He was loud, charming in that reckless kind of way, always saying things that made me laugh, or blush. He had this fire in him. You know? That kind of boldness that makes your heart skip even when you know you should be careful. He held my hand like it meant something. He'd say things like, "I'll pull you out of the mud, you hear me?" And I believed him. Because life back then? It was mud. Post-Soviet, Eastern Europe. Crumbling economy. Grocery shelves half empty. There were days we didn't even have bread. If it weren't for my parents in the countryside, sending us potatoes, flour, sometimes a few crumpled bills, we'd have gone hungry. The first few years, I told myself it was love. We laughed. Traveled by bus. Slept in cold train stations with our arms wrapped around each other. I clung to those moments like they were proof that I mattered. That he loved me. But something shifted. And once it did, it never shifted back. He started getting jealous. Of everything. The cashier who smiled too long. A classmate I hadn't seen in years. A name signed on a thank you note from a church volunteer project. I gave him no reason. None. But he'd still go cold. Silent. 2-3 days of icy distance, then the explosion. And then nothing. Back to silence. As if nothing happened. He drank more. Came home late. Said he was working, but smelled like vodka. When I asked where he'd been, he snapped. "You think it's easy putting food on this table while you sit here playing house?" And that was the story I was assigned. That my place was here, cleaning, cooking, raising the kids, being invisible. And his place? Was to show up drunk and furious, every 8 weeks, like clockwork, and then pretend like everything was fine again. And I let him. Because that's what women did. Especially back then. Especially there. We were told. Men work. Men are tired. Don't nag him. Give him space. Be a good wife. Keep the house clean. Be quiet when he's quiet. So I was quiet. Even when I was screaming inside. The 7th year hit like a storm. He lost his job, and with it, whatever was left of him. He just faded. He'd sit in that chair for hours, staring into nothing, beer in hand, rage boiling under the surface. Sometimes he wouldn't say a word to me for days. And then suddenly, he'd bring me apples. Smile like it was 1995 again. "Let's go to the lake," he'd say. "You need to remember you're still a woman, not just a mom in an apron." And I'd go. Because I wanted to believe that boy was still in there somewhere. The one who kissed my wrist the first time we danced in the kitchen. But with every silence, every slammed door, every muttered insult, I lost pieces of myself. Quietly. Permanently. I never left. Because we had a daughter. And I told myself, she needs her father. Even if that father didn't see her. Even if he barely saw me. And you don't just walk out. Not when you're poor. Not when the town talks. Not when the only place you could go is your parents' one-bedroom farmhouse, and you're already ashamed they're keeping you fed. So I stayed. I smiled in front of neighbors. Said we were fine. Told myself, this is just marriage. This is just what love looks like, after time. But it wasn't love. It was a cage. Silent. Domestic. And terrifying. There wasn't a fight. No yelling. No broken plates. Just this one ordinary Tuesday when I realized, he could look me in the eye and lie. It started with a phone call. He told me he'd be late, stuck at the factory, some overtime shift he couldn't say no to. But I knew. I knew. His voice had that edge, the one that sounded too practiced, like a line rehearsed in front of a mirror. I tried not to spiral. I made dinner. Fed our daughter. Washed the dishes while watching the clock like it owed me answers. Midnight came. He walked in smelling like cheap liquor and someone else's perfume. Not much. Just enough to make my stomach flip. And I asked, carefully. So carefully. Did you eat? You smell like cologne. He stopped. Looked at me. And said, you think I have time to run around? I work my ass off and come home to this? Just like that, I was the problem. I was always the problem. He didn't hit me. Not that night. Not ever, really. He never had to. He could slice me open with his tone alone. He turned it into a lecture, about how I had no idea what pressure felt like. How I got to sit on my ass at home all day, while he was out there making sure we had a roof over our heads. He said it like I was some princess lounging in silk, not a woman scraping dried soup off cracked plates and praying our daughter's fever would break before the aspirin ran out. He sat down at the table, opened a beer, and said nothing else. That's silence again. The kind that tells you everything. And I remember standing there, still holding the sponge, my hands dripping water, staring at him like, who are you? That night, when I climbed into bed next to him, my back to his chest, my eyes wide open in the dark, I knew. Not in a dramatic, thunderclap kind of way. But in the quiet, sinking way a person knows a bridge has snapped under their feet. I stopped believing him. Not just about where he was that night. But about everything. His promises. His apologies. His fake little comebacks, the flowers after the storm. It was all part of the cycle. The rotation. Rage, silence, guilt, charm, repeat. He wasn't evil. That's the thing. He could be funny. Charismatic. Even gentle, in his own strange rhythm. But his love was conditional. It was love, if I obeyed. If I didn't ask too many questions. If I accepted that he was the one carrying the weight of the world, while I changed diapers, patched clothes, and cried in the laundry room so no one would hear. There were days we had no bread. I'd mash boiled potatoes with oil and call it supper. We made do. Because we had to. Because the banks were collapsing and the streets felt hungrier than we did. Because no one came to save families like ours. Especially the women. I didn't have a job. Not then. He said I didn't need one, that a mother belongs at home. That I'd embarrass him if I started working retail or cleaning houses. And what would people think? But now I wonder. Was that love? Or did he just want control? And the worst part? That night, when he turned off the light and fell asleep within minutes. I still watched his face in the dark, searching for the man I married. And I told myself, maybe he's just tired. Maybe next month will be better. Maybe. It's strange how a house can feel like it's shrinking, even when you don't move a single wall. We didn't have much, a tiny 2-bedroom in a gray building that smelled like boiled cabbage and radiator rust. The wallpaper peeled in the corners. The floor creaked like it was warning me every time I walked through the hallway. But that was our home. And over time, it felt smaller and smaller. Not because of space, but because of him. After that night I stopped believing him. Things didn't explode. They just compressed. Like someone tightening a belt around my ribs a little more every day. And then, I found out I was pregnant again. He didn't hug me. He didn't smile. He didn't even touch my stomach. Just stared, ran his hands through his hair, muttered, "Now's not the time," and left for a walk that lasted 6 hours. I sat alone on the kitchen floor that night. Our daughter asleep in the other room. Holding my stomach like it might vanish if I let go. I didn't want to cry. But I did. Not because I didn't love the baby. But because I already knew how hard it was going to be. And I knew he wouldn't be there. Not really. He worked more hours then. Or so he said. Came home later. Smelled worse. Talked less. The nights were long. The days were longer. I was home all the time. I had no job, no savings, no friends left. He didn't like when I went out. Even a walk with the stroller made him paranoid. Who'd you talk to? Why'd it take you so long? You like the attention, huh? It was like he believed the whole world was just waiting to steal me away. And yet he treated me like I was disposable. I tried to fight back. Once. I said I wanted to work. Just part-time. Just to help with groceries. He slammed his fork down and said, "What, my money's not good enough now?" And I said nothing after that. The days turned into a loop. Wake up. Feed our daughter. Cook. Clean. Fold. Nurse. Try not to cry. Repeat. Sometimes I wouldn't speak for hours. There just wasn't anyone to talk to. And when he came home, half drunk and emotionally vacant, I didn't have the strength to start anything. So I became a shell. You ever felt that? Like you're living next to your own body? Watching it make soup and fold laundry, smile for the kids, but inside, you're gone. That's where I lived. Inside silence. Inside routine. Inside a marriage that felt more like a prison sentence passed down for being born female in a country that said, "What did you expect?" I remember one night, heavily pregnant, standing on the balcony in a threadbare robe, watching the lights flicker in the apartment across the street. A woman in a pink sweater was laughing. She looked free. I hated her for a second. Then I realized, I used to look like that. And that terrified me more than anything. Not that I was unloved. But that I had stopped loving myself. It was raining that day. Not the romantic kind of rain you see in movies, just gray, cold, bone-deep wetness that makes you feel like the sky forgot how to be gentle. I was pushing the stroller through mud and broken sidewalk. Pregnant, tired, trying not to cry because our daughter was screaming and I had exactly 14 cents in my pocket. I just needed bread. Nothing more. That's when it happened. A man. Maybe early 40s. Blue jacket, kind eyes. He held the door open for me at the market. That's it. Just held the door. And I almost burst into tears right there. He said, "You okay?" And I just nodded, even though I wanted to fall to the floor and scream no. I'm not. I haven't been okay in years. But I smiled. Because I was trained to. Then he did the unthinkable. He handed me a coin. Quietly. Said, "For the bread." I've been there. I wanted to throw it back in his face. I wanted to say I don't need your pity. But I didn't. I took the coin. Bought the bread. And stood outside in the rain holding the warm loaf like it was some kind of holy object. Not because of the food, but because someone, for the first time in forever, had seen me. Not as a wife. Not as a mother. But as a person. Tired. So tired. And real. I walked home slow. Felt guilty. I kept thinking, what if he saw? What if my husband saw that man speak to me? He didn't have to be there. He knew things. Or said he did. Once, I passed a neighbor on the stairs, an old classmate, and we exchanged 3 words. That night, he accused me of flirting. Said I looked too happy. He always said I smiled too much at other men. So that night, even though it was just a man holding a door, I felt like I'd cheated. Like I'd done something vile. And when he came home, I scrubbed the counters so hard my hands cracked. Put extra salt in the stew. Tried to overcompensate with silence and service. Because guilt is a leash, and I'd been wearing it for so long, I didn't even notice the bruises around my neck anymore. He was drunk again. Kicked off his boots, muttered about work. Didn't notice anything. But I did. I noticed I didn't miss him when he wasn't home. I noticed I was scared less when he wasn't in the room. I noticed the only warmth I'd felt that week came from a stranger's outstretched hand. And that's when something broke in me. Not loud. Just broke. I started wondering what life might be like without him. I didn't plan anything. Didn't pack a bag. But the thought was there now, small, stubborn, and alive. Hope. The dangerous kind. The baby came in January. There was no snow that year, just gray slush and broken heating pipes and a cold so sharp it crawled under your skin and stayed there. I gave birth at the local clinic. No epidural. No husband at my side. He said he was busy with something that day. Later, I found out he'd been drinking at his friend's garage, watching some old football match and talking politics like the world didn't have anything better to do. Our son was born small, wrinkled, red-faced and screaming like he already knew what kind of life he'd entered. And I remember lying in that hard hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, whispering, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Not because he existed. But because he was being born into a house that had no softness left. When we came home, the heater was broken. He didn't fix it. Said we didn't have money for parts. But he had money for vodka. For cigarettes. For lotto tickets. We slept in the same room, all 3 of us, wearing coats under the blankets. Our daughter coughed through most nights. I breastfed with numb fingers, humming lullabies through chattering teeth. He didn't hold the baby. Not once. Said it wasn't his job. Said he was exhausted from work. Said I knew what I was signing up for when I wanted another kid. But I didn't want another kid. I never got to want anything. It just happened. And like everything else in my life, I adapted. Because that's what women did. We didn't choose. We endured. He started disappearing for longer stretches. Sometimes whole weekends. Came home half asleep, smelling like gasoline and something floral I didn't wear. And when I asked him where he'd been, he just looked at me like I'd asked something offensive. No trust in this house anymore, he snapped. As if I was the one destroying it. I looked in the mirror one morning, just after sunrise, and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Her hair was dull, stuck to her forehead in stringy pieces. Her eyes were hollow. Her skin sagged like it gave up. I used to be warm. I used to laugh at stupid things. I used to dance around the kitchen with a wooden spoon. Now I barely spoke. The baby cried. The toddler whined. The walls felt like they were closing in. I stopped going outside. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't see the point. There was nowhere to go, and no one waiting for me there. He'd show up late, complain the soup was cold, toss his coat onto the floor, and say things like, "You wouldn't last a day at my job. Try pouring concrete for 12 hours and then come home to this circus." And I'd just nod. Pick up his coat. Warm the soup. Pretend I didn't notice the lipstick on his collar. He never hit me. He didn't have to. He knew how to kill things quietly, without bruises, without broken dishes. He killed me one silent minute at a time. And I let him. Because I didn't know how to leave. Because I still told myself, the kids need a father. Because poverty doesn't give you a lot of options. Because shame is louder than truth sometimes. But deep inside me, something had shifted. A voice. Small, scared, but clear. It whispered. You are not alive anymore. You are surviving. And that terrified me more than anything he could ever say. It happened in the bathroom. Not during a fight. Not when he slammed a door or called me names. No, it was in the stillest moment. Me, barefoot on cold tile, holding a toothbrush in one hand, and a hairbrush in the other. Looking at my own reflection like I was some ghost someone forgot to bury. And then I whispered it. I want out. It didn't sound like a war cry. More like a prayer. A confession. A truth I couldn't unhear once I said it. He was in the living room. Drunk. Laughing at something on the TV. Our son was crying in his crib. Our daughter was curled up in the corner with her doll, pretending not to be scared. That night, he'd come home 3 hours late, stinking of liquor and smoke. He looked at the mess in the kitchen and said, "What the hell do you do all day?" And I just stood there. No anger. No defense. Just hollow. I warmed the soup. Fed the baby. Cleaned the floor. Said nothing. But in the bathroom, I finally said something to myself. I didn't know how. Where I'd go. Who I could call. We had no savings. No car. No internet. No support. But something inside me didn't care anymore. Because I realized I wasn't just tired. I was done. Done explaining. Done justifying. Done calling it a bad time, or stress, or how men are. This wasn't a rough patch. This was my life. And I didn't want it anymore. I packed 2 bags over the next week. Quietly, carefully, like a thief in my own home. Diapers, baby clothes, documents, 1 photo of me and the kids from when they were still small enough to fit on my lap at the same time. I didn't tell anyone. Not even my mother. Not yet. Because if I said it out loud, someone might talk me out of it. And I couldn't afford to be talked out of it. Then one night, while he was passed out on the couch, I got the kids dressed. Put on my old coat. Taped a note to the inside of the bedroom door, 3 words. I'm not coming back. I walked 6 blocks to the train station. Paid with coins I'd hidden in the flour jar for months. We rode for hours, the kids asleep on my lap, their cheeks red from the cold. We went to my mother's. She didn't ask questions. She just opened the door and said, "You should have come sooner." And I cried like I was being born again. Because I was tired. Terrified. But finally free. It's been 25 years. I've remarried since then. Lived in 3 cities. Watched my kids grow into people I'm proud of, strong, soft, loud when they need to be. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and the windows hum with wind, I think about that girl I used to be. The one in the cracked mirror. Holding a toothbrush like a weapon. Whispering things no one would hear. And I want to reach through time and take her hand. Tell her she wasn't weak. Tell her survival isn't shameful. Tell her I'm proud of her. I never told anyone the full story. Not really. Not the long silences. Not the way he'd look through me like I was a speck of dust on the furniture. Not the way he made me believe I was lucky to have him. That I was nothing without him. But I'm saying it now. Here. To no one in particular, and to everyone who might need to hear it. Marriage doesn't mean ownership. Silence is not safety. Being needed is not the same as being loved. People say abuse looks like bruises. Mine didn't. Mine looked like dinner on the table at 6 o'clock sharp. Like cold shoulders. Like accusations disguised as concern. Like, I work all day while you sit at home. Like, you're imagining things. Like, who's been calling the house? It looked like poverty. Like borrowed potatoes from neighbors. Like kids bundled in 3 sweaters because we couldn't afford heat. It looked like a woman dying in slow motion. While everyone said, "But he doesn't hit you." So no, I don't talk about those years at parties. I don't bring them up in parent-teacher meetings or when someone asks me how long I've been married. But now, in this moment, in this space, I am telling it. Because there's a woman out there. Right now. With a baby on her hip and a man yelling in the next room. And she's whispering to herself, "This can't be it." To her I say, "You're not crazy. You're not wrong. And you are not alone." I didn't leave because I was strong. I left because I was empty. Because I had no other choice but to survive. And sometimes, that's enough. Now, when I look in the mirror, I see all of us. All the women who stayed. All the women who left. All the women who are still deciding. We are not broken. We are rebuilding. And that is its own kind of love story.